There we go.
Okay.
Okay, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the Democratic Services Committee on the 19th of July 2021. Shall we start with the first item is the election of a vice chair for this year 2021-2022.
Can I nominate Councillor Wendy Lewis?
Second.
Second. Everybody in favour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody against? No? No abstentions? Should have started by asking if you're willing, Wendy.
Of course I am.
That's fine then. That's okay. So, right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're now the vice chair. Next item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Erica Kirshner for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Third one is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Nobody? Can't imagine, but no, none. Good. Can we move on to the minutes? I hope you've all read them. Shall we go through them for accuracy first? On page 1, 2, 3. Has anybody marked anything incorrect? Would anybody like to move an accurate record?
I'll move.
Thank you.
Second.
Your second.
Second.
Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Nobody against? Right. Can't see anybody. Thank you. We'll move on. The member induction programme from 2022. I think Tracy is going to go through this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is a report around member induction training following the local government elections next year in May 2022. And it will cover training not only for those councillors that are returning, but also for newly elected councillors. So just taking you to the actual report itself, it does seem like a long time away to be considering induction training, but it'll be upon us really soon. So I just wanted to start that conversation with the Democratic Services Committee in terms of starting to look at what sort of induction training you'll be looking at going forward to the elections. So if I just take you, I found 3 documents which I think will be really helpful to inform your discussions. So at page 7, at Appendix 1, is the Councillor Induction and Training Programme for 2017-2018 local government election. So you can see there that it sets out the dates when the training will take place, the times the training will take place, the nature of the training, the room and the officers providing that training. It also quite usefully sets out which training is considered compulsory, and I don't think it will come as any surprise. It's training such as good decision making, bias and predetermination, breach of the code of conduct. There's also compulsory training for committee members on those quasi-judicial committees, such as planning and licensing. So that's Appendix 1, which is the previous training that we had for the last local government elections. And then the other 2 documents, the WLGA documents, which I thought might be really useful as well for you to consider in terms of looking at what training councillors need going forward. So the first document is on page 13, and this is the WLGA Development Framework for Councillors in May 2021, which has recently been published in April 2021. And this document has come about as a result of conversations and meetings between councillors and officers working both with the WLGA, so it is very much a combined approach. It outlines those knowledge and behaviours required by councillors in councils in Wales, and it quite helpfully, I think, sets it out in 2 parts. I quite like the way it was set out actually. So on page 16, you've got Part A training, which is relevant to all councillors. That is subdivided into further requirements, fundamental requirements, local leadership, partnership and representation, etc. I don't propose to go through it, but I'll just take you briefly through it. So you'll see on page 16, again, we're focusing on training relevant to all councillors. In terms of the range of general skills required by all members, they've highlighted things such as conduct, so the code of conduct, knowledge of breach of code of conduct, corporate governance, so the principles of good corporate governance, good decision making, public participation, etc. And then over the page, on page 18, they've highlighted training such as information and data handling and management, IT skills, which I'm sure councillors will consider really important, social media skills and meeting preparation. And then over the page again, which I think councillors might be really interested to see on there, is personal safety of all councillors. So they're the generic training that they've highlighted. Then on page 20, it talks about local leadership, which is the range of skills required by all councillors in their role as community leaders. And again, just touching on some of those, it talks again about the voluntary sector, it talks about consultation and engagement. Then it goes on to deal with casework on behalf of the public, so being accessible to the public, managing your casework, signposting. And then again, over the page, it talks about partnership and representation. So this is quite a useful one, I think, because it talks about when you're appointed in your role as a councillor to an outside body. So what are the expectations of you if you, for example, become a director of a company or you become a charitable trustee, but you're appointed by the council. And also you work as a school governor. So all the issues that you need to know about becoming a school governor. And then it goes on to talk about finally working in the political environment, which I don't really propose to go through. And then the second part of all this is part B. So part A related to the generic training relevant for all councillors, and then part B talks about relevant training to councillors undertaking specialist roles. So it talks about if you're on scrutiny, you need training on scrutiny. If you're a chair of a committee, you might need separate training on being a chair and how to handle meetings. It talks about serving on the statutory and regulatory committees. So again, we're talking about licensing, we're talking about planning. So having that specific training, which enables councillors to undertake their role on that specific committee. And if you think of things like the Governance and Audit Committee, for example, they work a lot with the SIPFA rules. So it's training on financial matters, risk matters, SIPFA matters. So it's more specialised training depending on what committees councillors are actually elected onto. And then finally, it talks about executive members and civic leadership and council leadership. So that's the end of that document, which is the WLGA framework. So that sets out what sort of training and what knowledge and what skills they're expecting councillors to have. And as I say, that's been put together not just by the WLGA, but by the WLGA working with officers and working with councillors. And then the final document at Appendix 3 on page 29, I think it is a framework induction curriculum for candidates and new members in Wales, again for the local government elections next year. It's in draft format. I couldn't find a final version actually, so I think this is still in draft. And this document quite helpfully, I think, sets out methods of training. So it talks about suggestions which have been put forward, presumably by councillors, about less is more and not overwhelming councillors right at the start of their being elected to office, not overwhelming councillors with all the training. So trying to work out that how best to handle the training, whether it's face-to-face, whether you do it via e-learning, and also structuring that training so you get the most important training, which could be something like code of conduct, so you're aware of your duties under the code of conduct right at the start of your elected period, rather than putting it 6 months down the line when really you should know it straight away. But those things that can wait until 6 months down the line, trying to organise them in that sort of way. So it talks about, you know, as and when you get the training and how you combine that with face-to-face, and trying to make it as dynamic and engaging as possible, which again, if you think about it, if you're all having this massive training when you're first elected, it's just that tsunami of information hitting you, isn't it? So trying to keep it live, trying to keep it engaging, etc. So I just thought that document might be quite helpful. They also attach a schedule about when, what delivery method, training materials available. And I can only think that this is a piece of work that the WLGA are also working on in providing e-learning materials for councillors once they are elected. So we need to take that on board as well, because there may be other training out there. And certainly when we had training in 2017, if you remember, I don't know whether you attended the training on bias and predetermination, which Peter Keith Lucas gave. And I think we you know, that was really good training, and he came in to do that. So it's just trying to mix that training up. So those are the 3 documents that I thought might be helpful in you considering training going forward. The recommendations are on page 4, but really it's just to launch that discussion as a committee to start considering what training might need to be delivered post the election next year. It might take a couple of meetings, Chair, to actually go through this, or you might want to think about setting up a smaller task and finish group that can do the work and then present it back to the committee at either the next meeting or whenever we add additional meetings, if that's what the committee wants. So I don't propose to say anything more. Happy to take any questions, but as I say, I'm hoping this will just trigger that discussion about training for post-election next year.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. We'll do the questions first, and then we'll go back to the idea of the working party. June, I think you were first.
Yeah, on Appendix 1, Section 5, it talks about marketplace events, and to look at Appendix C, there's no Appendix C.
Yeah, I noticed that actually when I read the paper. I thought it was attached. So I haven't actually got it. I don't know whether it's something that Democratic Services can possibly find. I know they sent me this version, so it may be that Alison can check whether or not we've still got that appendix.
Yeah, we've probably got it somewhere, so I'll try and find it and circulate it to the committee.
And the other question, Chair, is I've read all the documents, but I can't remember if I've seen it. Will councillors be advised that they will have an allowance to purchase equipment? Because a number of new councillors coming in will think, oh, I've got to get this and I've got to get that.
Chair, if I can just take that, I think that's something that would be considered separately, Councillor Burton-Shaw. And I haven't included anything around that because this was just really looking at the training that's to be provided post-election. But I think there will certainly need to be a further report brought back to the committee. And it may actually be a discussion that you want to have on the next agenda item as well, in terms of, you know, the questionnaire about attending meetings remotely going forward. But there, there will be an intention to bring something back on that specific issue, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I remember rightly, there was some information provided before we did this assigning of the acceptance and office. It was all provided at the very beginning about what things you could claim and what have you.
Yeah, I think Hugh actually did a session with members, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, but I think it's something that should be included. Yes, you're quite right. Who was next? Leslie.
You're moved, Les. I pressed it and I must have pressed again. Just to preface it, I've got 2 or 3 comments I want to make, but I would generally say that we can certainly make good use of what we did leading up to 2017, or the induction programme from that year. I think that's an excellent basis. But the other documents, Tracy, that you circulated, certainly there's some useful things that we can sort of fit in. Of the 3 specific points, I want to start with social media and IT. I think it could be argued that up to a few years ago, it might have been something that could have waited, because I notice in Appendix 3, it suggests, oh, you don't need it till about half the way through the year, 6 months later. And I'm thinking, no way, you have got to know IT and be as aware as possible. And particularly if we keep going down the route of online meetings rather than face-to-face, it's going to get more and more important. So I certainly think that definitely needs to be in the first couple of weeks, I reckon. I think you virtually need it as soon as you take the job on. A second point was slightly different. I noticed that there's a section on page 30 about potential candidates. And I think it's a bit of a shame that we haven't actually looked at this bit of the document before now, because it's obviously got ideas that we could have started looking at 2-3 years ago. In particular, one of the things I think we desperately need is to try and encourage people from underrepresented groups to put their names forward as councillors. Now, you were saying earlier, Tracy, that maybe it's quite a long time before elections. Well, I know what, the year will vanish for a start off. And I think maybe this is something that it's nowhere near enough time really to do justice to trying to get and address and communicate with enough people from all different walks of life to encourage anybody and everybody that they can become a councillor. But I'd like us to do whatever we can on that score. And the last point, yeah, I might be being a bit over protective, but on page 19, A20, about financial capability, I think we need to be slightly careful in assuming that all councillors absolutely need to know a lot about the budget, a lot about the money. There are some excellent councillors around and their forte will not be the budget. There are also some excellent councillors around whose forte is exactly that. So I think just want to be careful that we don't make it seem like, oh, you've got to be good at numeracy and put people off that way. I think we just manage to word it in such a way that, because there are plenty of people out there who say anything to do with maths there and we'll run a mile. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. And Wendy?
Yeah, I agree with Les there, because I don't like maths. I'm hopeless. So I have no idea, but I will say the best training I ever went on was Ben Smith, because he made me understand figures, because I laugh so much at him that you understand he's a good teacher. So it does help. And I think, you know, a lot of councillors weren't there to see Ben, and I just think you should be there, because you can learn something. Even when you've been a councillor a long time, you can keep learning things. Just thinking of this, the way it's set out, it's very good. And to take on the points of June and Les. But Linda and I attended these workshops, didn't we, Linda? And we laughed and we nearly cried at some of the things on there, and got to this, obviously, that position through those workshops. I was mortified because I hate workshops. I kept asking Linda to talk when it was time. But I think they've come up with a good strategy, because when you get overwhelmed at the beginning as a councillor, it's right. You're taking in too much to learn. And I've attended every session of everything I can and have done. But setting it out like that, I think it's a good idea of the time you need it. So I was trying to take, my drawer here is full of all the training sessions I went to. And I think, looking back, I'm thinking, oh, I never looked at that. I've learned as I've gone along. But if this, the way it's set out, with giving the people a chance, 2 months, 3 months, I think it makes a lot more sense. A lot of it may not make sense to us, but I think that makes sense to me. And it is overwhelming for councillors when they start. So I'm quite pleased with this, the way it's come out.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. Linda?
Yeah, just two things really. Leslie was right when she says about there are different types of counsellors. I've always felt that there are. I'm a sort of a social worker type of counsellor. I'm very good at dealing with people and solving problems. I've got other colleagues who are very confrontational. I am not confrontational, and they are. It's good that they're confrontational because they will pick at something until they get the answer. I'm not very good at that. I'm too sort of law-abiding. If somebody tells me something, I'll say yes and nod my head. So I think there's that on one hand. The other thing is, when my husband was a councillor many, many years ago, and also I think when Cheryl Philpott was starting off as being a councillor, there was a sort of a mentor. There was somebody that they could go to if they were stuck. And I don't think that goes on anymore. But I always think that to have a person, I mean, my person is June Burton Shaw. I mean, I go to her and she's not allocated to me, but she's my go-to person. If I'm stuck, there have been many times when June has helped me and pointed me in the right direction. And I think that all this training, that's fine. All these sort of, you know, you've got your sort of script and you can put it in your drawer. But I think that there comes a time when you just need just to have a person to go to. That's all. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
That's better.
Have I said something? Have I said?
No.
No. Have you finished, Linda? Right.
Yes.
There was Nick had his hand up before.
Oh, right.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Leslie, could you say a little bit more about the point you were making about unrepresented groups being councillors, or people from unrepresented or underrepresented groups being councillors? Because I believe that the Welsh Local Government Association has done some work on this and adopted a policy. Is that what you're referring to, or were you just referring to a need to assume that not everyone needs the same level of training, or what? I'm not just curious as to the point you were making. That's all, Leslie.
It was from the document Appendix C. That it doesn't just look at induction. It was also talking about potential candidates. So I just picked up on that point, and the fact that in the timetable it suggested that this is something could be addressed sometime before we start looking at the induction plan. So yes, if the Welsh Local Government Association are doing something, great, and let's all know about it so we can be part and parcel of passing the message on.
Well, I believe they adopted a policy, and on the basis that generally, I think the premise of it was that local government does not always adequately represent the breadth of the community which it serves. Simple point. But no doubt some work can be done on that, yes, because it's very important.
Right, thank you. Tracy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that point, thank you, Chair. I believe the piece of work that is being referred to is the diversity and democracy piece of work that will shortly be before councillors, actually. Leslie is quite right. It was a piece of work that was picked up by the WLGA and Welsh Government, I think, around trying to encourage more candidates from ethnic minorities and different backgrounds to stand as candidates in the next local government election. And I think that's possibly why there is training referred to on here about prospective candidates training as well. For my own part, I think the only thing we could do in terms of candidates is to make it quite clear to candidates who are standing for elections who may not have been councillors in their lifetime, is that this is the expectation of you if you are elected, that you will have to undergo this level of training, so that they're fully aware of what sort of training is likely to be lined up for them should they be the successful candidate. But I think, going back to the question Nick raised, I think he's probably referring to the diversity and democracy piece of work.
I am Tracy, yes. I am Tracy, yes.
Okay, right. June, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, sorry of coming back in. On the Appendix 1, where it's got compulsory training for committee members, will that be given prior to the committee? Because if we're going to nominate committee members, then we can only do, well, no, it's going to apply to all members, whether new or old. So when will the training be given for those on the committees?
Tracy, have you got an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, Chair, that will be something that will have to be prioritised, because don't forget, the reason why we mainly put in that should be mandatory or compulsory training is because a lot of those committees are quasi-judicial. So we don't want to run the risk of councillors being on that committee and not quite understanding what decisions they are making. So that will need to be prioritised, Councillor Burtonshaw. You're quite right.
Thank you. Matthew? You're on mute.
Hello. I'm your chair. Being newly elected myself back in May. You're quite right, it can be overwhelming. A lot of information to take in when you first elected. I think what I could have done with when I was elected was a bit of an officer's fact sheet, who to go to with certain problems. You know, if I got a highways problem, and I appreciate officers change, move on, retire, new officers start. But I could have really done, I would have really found that useful. If I got a parks issue, speak to John. If I got a highways issue, speak to Jonathan. Do you know? So I think that would have been really, really useful for me. I'm not sure if that's something that has been done in the past, but it definitely would have been beneficial, because I was receiving emails and phone calls probably the next day about stuff, you know, sort of test the new guy sort of thing, isn't it? Or the new girl. So that's one thing I would have found beneficial as well.
We have had them in the past and they are very beneficial, but it's keeping them up to date.
Yeah.
As you say, the officers keep changing around and some of them are doing more than one job now. Yes. Who else? Leslie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, sneaking back in again, but I just wanted to link in with training for committees and just generally just to reinforce the point I was trying to make about social media. I think social media is being used more and more now, and it will continue to do so. So I think one of the essential things that you need to learn as soon as you become a councillor are the sort of rules, the etiquette, because it is so easy. Even if you know the rules and etiquette, it is so easy to go and put something on Facebook. When you're in a hurry, you're reacting to somebody very quickly. So I think, again, that kind of thing, you've got to know that. You've got to be able to hit the ground running with that knowledge of exactly the kind of things you should and should not use Facebook for. And I think that's something that has got to go out in the first week. No. Definitely no question.
Susan? Sue?
Oh, thanks, Linda. I know when I was first elected, we had a mentor that was an officer, and I found that very useful in the very beginning, because they would direct us to wherever we needed to go. And we also had a situation, sorry, my phone's going now. We also had a situation that we were taken on a tour of the county and shown various things that the county were involved with. And I did find that very useful at the time.
Right. Thank you. Mike?
Hiya, how are we? My IT is playing in and out. It's just, I'm here and there and everywhere for a sec, so I might disappear. Just to say I support Collie's comments, particularly in the context of mentoring. I felt that Matthew was a newly elected councillor in 2017. You know, having that kind of support is very powerful and important, I think. Weaving in non-council perspectives might be useful as well. You know, we should be careful of making sure that everyone is very warmly welcomed when they first become a councillor. But always remember that people have done a lot of other stuff before they join the council. You know, so value that experience too. I wonder whether we've got an opportunity to look at, in the context of diversity, Tracy, in particular, whether we've got the opportunity to weave an awareness of democratic processes, the role of elected members, of members of the Senate, etc., into the school curriculum more powerfully, as we've got a new curriculum for Wales coming forward. I know in some of our most deprived communities this is very relevant. We've now got the socio-economic duty under Part 1 of the Equality Act in force in Wales. We know that some communities, wards in Swansea, will have 20% of people actually turning out to vote in local elections. So there are real opportunities there to switch people onto the nature of local government, public services, and political engagement, I think. For me, I think the invaluable experience of the people I very fondly call the elders is you can't beat that. You really can't. So I'm with Linda Tyler Lloyd entirely, completely. And I remember many years ago working closely with local government for the first time. My mentor was the late Councillor Tussell Lewis, who just like knew everything and everybody, and you could ask a question and he would save you hours of chasing your tail. So utilise what we've already got and bring us together in maybe in less formal environments as well, so we can chat about our hopes and fears and get the answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Nick, have you got your hand up again?
Sorry, legacy hand.
Okay. Sue, is your hand still up or have you put it up again?
No, I put it up again. I agree with what Mike is saying, and to welcome new councillors is very, very important. I've not met Matthew. I know the situation at the minute is really quite strange, but when we had a lounge that we all could sit in, we got to know each other an awful lot better than we do at the minute. I don't see one councillor from one meeting to the next, and it would be nice to have an informal environment that we could actually go along and have a little chat with people, because you learn a lot informally.
Thanks, Sue. Right, no more questions? Right, shall we go back to the main question? Are we going to have a working party to go through these induction processes and bring papers and recommendations to the next committee? Any views?
Chair, I'm happy to have a working party because there's a lot to go through. Yes. And if I leave it to you and the Vice Chair to find out who would be interested in joining that and then go from there.
So have we got anybody that's interested in joining working party? I'll send an email out of it as well.
June,
Leslie?
Yeah. Important. Like June, I think it's important. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to do it as a group this big would be far too unwieldy. So it'd be far more sensible to have 2 or 3, have a look through it, but then by all means bring it forward and everybody can then have their say. But it makes it a lot easier for people to think, oh, well, I'm not quite sure about that, or I like that, or whatever. And yes, I'd be happy to join.
Right, thank you, Leslie. So we've got a few, but as I said, I'll send an email out and you can respond to the email, and it'll give the other people who aren't in the meeting, well, there's only Eric recently, a chance. Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to the next item? Councillor questionnaire. I assume you've all seen it. Maybe you've tried filling it in. I'll hand it to Tracy. Have you got any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will be brief on this one. I mean, we've been attending meetings remotely for quite some time now, obviously owing to COVID. I thought it worthwhile putting a questionnaire together. It is short, but just to gather the views of councillors about their experiences of remote meetings, whether they've had any difficulties which we can improve on going forward. I'm sure, you know, there'll be lots of mention of technical difficulties, but I think probably everybody will agree we've got much better as we've gone on through the course of the year. The chamber and the Gloucester room is being presently kitted out for remote meetings, hybrid meetings, and there is a piece of work being undertaken by Welsh Government and the WRGA around multi-location meetings. So the Local Government and Elections Wales Act does provide us with the opportunity to continue conducting meetings remotely. Probably many of you will be aware that there was a huge fuss about this in England when they decided not to extend their remote meetings in England. Welsh Government have extended it to Wales. So we can continue to meet remotely. As I say, they're working on this multi-location hybrid guidance, which we're waiting to see what that says. And I think the idea is once we've gathered all the council's views and officers. In fact, I think we probably will extend this questionnaire to officers as well. Once we've gathered all the views, that would be very useful in putting together a hybrid policy that we can all utilise when we revert back to the office when social distancing goes, etc., and we decide how we're going to set up our meetings going forward. Because you will be aware that our constitution largely provides for physical face-to-face meetings. So we do need a hybrid policy. Some councils are already ahead of us in terms of already developing hybrid policies. So we need to crack on and do that quite quickly, I think. So this is the questionnaire. It's something that I threw together. So by all means, I'd welcome your comments on it, whether or not something else should be added. Or something deleted, but it's very much predicated on the basis that our remote meetings will continue. It's just for you to have or for councillors to have an opportunity really to feed into it and largely comment on what support they think they could do with going forward. So I don't propose to say anything more. Probably should add, Chair, that I've spoken to Rhiannon Miller, who deals with a lot of consultations. She's on annual leave at the moment, but she has agreed to organise sending it out to all councillors when she returns from annual leave, and she will coordinate all the responses as well, which will be particularly helpful.
Right, June, I think you were first.
As I'm looking at the questionnaire, question 9 and 10, and I think this is where IT come in to make sure we have good IT training and the IT works. It's been chaotic today, not just for us, but for the IT section as well. And I think that needs to be sorted out so we can go straight into a meeting rather than be frustrated trying to get in.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to say, I think the questionnaire is on the right lines. I've got a few bits and pieces, nothing major, but I don't really want to go through it. Would it be better if I just it circulated an email and said that, because there's quite a few minor tweaks, nothing major, but just some things that I think I would like to suggest. Thanks.
Thanks, Leslie. Wendy?
Yeah, I agree with Les and June, because there are a few things. My gripe, if that can be noted, would be a week ago today. I love remotely, so I'm not against it, because it's really made me vocal where I wasn't before. I mean, I've always been quite a vocal person, but not when we're in a room full of people. But I'm feeling I can do it on here, and it's brought my confidence up that way. But a week ago today, I had 5 meetings in a day, back to back, and then one of them was at the Guildhall, which I have to attend every few months to chair it, and I had to get back for the next meeting. So I feel that when we were face to face, we never had that many meetings in one day. There was no way we had that many meetings. And some of them are ridiculous meetings, and you think, oh, do I have to? But I'm of the ilk, maybe my age, you attend everything. That's what you've been paid for. You attend those meetings. But that is my only gripe, and I think that needs to be addressed going forward if we're going to do hybrid meetings also, because it is very difficult. I panicked that I wouldn't get home because the school came out, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to join in my car now and this, that and the other. So, and I think it puts pressure on you then as a councillor that you're not doing your job properly. I am probably a bit over the top, and but that's my feel. That's just my feeling on remote.
Thank you. Right. The one item I quickly picked up was the full council. I think the ceremonial council should be kept separate from the general full council meetings. Bit difficult to do those from a distance. Right. Any other questions? Oh, Linda.
No, just to say, I agree with Wendy. I mean, it was sometimes I was back-to-back meetings, and I thought this is absolutely crazy. I was exhausted, and especially when you tend to have meetings then, you know, like with the community council added on. And one day I was from 11 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at the night, and I thought, with back-to-back meetings and the other things that you do, like the school meetings and the community council meetings. And I felt in some ways that there were too many meetings. They seem to be growing like topsy. So yes, too many meetings back to back. Yeah, okay.
And it does leave you looking at a computer screen for too many hours at a time without much of a break.
Yeah.
Matthew, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was going to bring that point up that you made as well. You know, too much screen time as well can be detrimental. So I'm finding it a little bit difficult on the eye sometimes. But I still think there are definite benefits to the remote meetings as well. I personally work full time for another local authority, and I'd be quite hard pushed to make some of the meetings down the Guildhall maybe. So you know, I live 15 minutes away from work. I can get home and log on and attend as well. But I appreciate, you know, like it was brought up before by one of the other councillors, that we don't get that social element as well. We don't get to meet each other. You know, I think other my ward members, I think the only person I've met since I've been elected is Wendy, and that was on the tour of the arena. You know, so so it was sort of yeah, there's pros and cons to both, I think. Yeah.
And you haven't been the same since, have you, Matthew?
Tracy.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to throw in there the comment that Councillor Burtonshaw made on the last agenda item as well about, you know, your equipment, and also using your equipment when you're also trying to read the papers and the agenda. That can be, I find that very tricky as an officer. So I'm sure that you must also find it similarly tricky. So there is that issue about what sort of equipment you need, what you're allowed to purchase, what you can't purchase, etc. So again, I'm expecting something back from councillors along those lines as well.
Thank you. Wendy, Wendy again.
I just want to say what Tracy just said then, you're on, but I've had to go and buy another iPad because I couldn't, you know, you can't print off some of the agendas, can you? They're ridiculous, you know, you can't. So I had to go and buy one. Well, I got money in sitting there that I could use to buy it, but I won't, because you get it plastered all over Facebook that you spent X. I've had it an email today off a resident who said exactly the same thing. I've looked at what you know, and mine is very low. It's just my, you know, I don't claim for anything except my first iPad.
Yeah. Okay.
So you do need more equipment. And I think, you know, as long as you realise this when you become a councillor, that if you're going to do hybrid, you still need, because I think the council as well will save money on printing everything out for us. So if we've got something to look at it, even if we go into meetings, that would be fantastic.
Leslie?
Yeah, I think there is this assumption that a lot of us, if not all of us, are okay reading all documents online. Personally, I like to do a bit of both. I do a lot of reading first thing in the morning when I haven't got up yet, because I find I'm relaxed, I've got a fresh mind, and in that instance, I use it on paper. So one plea I would definitely have is that if down the road we are going to do a mix of sometimes physically face-to-face, but still online, and I like online for some of the reasons Wendy said, I would like at least to be actually be able to access a hard copy of the agendas. At the moment, what I tend to do is print off quite a bit of them and perhaps just have a few notes of some sections, because Wendy's quite right. I mean, sometimes if you've seen audit committee, if that's got the budget in, you can talk about between 200 and 300 pages. Well, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I shouldn't have to print that off. It should be available in hard copy as well as online.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on? Thank you. So If,
Sorry, Chair.
yes,
Could I just add just one thing in? I don't know how helpful or appropriate this might be, but at the university, what we've found, or I certainly found quite helpful, is when we got large, complex information and we wanted to convey it to a wide audience, we take an approach that the officers take brilliantly. I've got to say, our officers are fantastic in really boiling down the key messages. So, you know, Ben Smith with complex financial information, he will boil it down and give us the headline news. So what we've done is we've used short videos, very short videos, to draw people's eye to the key areas. So if you've got a agenda pack of 400 pages, you could cover that perhaps in a short video of maybe 5 minutes, where the key points are summarized. Something to think about, perhaps. You know, we can read 400 pages, or you could be really drawn to the key ideas and what we're being asked in the reports, rather than reading all the detail. Perhaps just an idea of how we communicate the most important key messages in a concise way, using the technology that's available to us now. Thank you.
good idea, Mike. Thank you. June?
Yeah, what I found interesting in the meeting I attended last week, the officers shared their screen and they put the agenda up on the screen so we could go through it page by page. And I think that would be very helpful.
Yes, our community council does that. It is useful. Thank you. Anything else? So those who've got suggestions for Tracy about amendments to the what's the name? The what do you want to call it? The survey. You'll send an email to Tracy, will you? Right, great. Thank you. So we can move on to the next item.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add to that? So of the recommendations on page 35, if you circulate to me any proposed amendments, I'll then redraft it and circulate it informally to the committee again. And then I've put down as a recommendation, Chair, that a report is brought back to this committee so that you can all see what the response is. And then I think further work going forward will be to work with me on this hybrid policy that will need developing.
Right, thank you. So really we want it on the agenda for our next meeting. Right. Okay, so we move on to the work plan. We have quite a number of items here, and a few others have come to mind over the course of this meeting. We haven't at the moment got a meeting booked until November, which I think is far too far in the future. I'd like us to bring meetings more regularly, starting in September. The questions are, do you want them monthly or bi-monthly? Shorter monthly meetings or longer bi-monthly meetings?
Oh, I don't know about monthly, Linda. As I said a week ago today, I don't know if I'd be able to fit in more. I'm not saying we shouldn't do more frequent, but monthly, I think, to me, anyway.
Bi-monthly. So we did one September, and then the next one would be November. We've got quite a number of items to go through.
Other than that, Chair, they could be put in monthly and you can make a decision to postpone one, and so it would be bi-monthly. Not bi-monthly, every 2 months.
Yes. Yes.
I'd go along with that, Chair.
Good. Okay, thank you. So I'll work with Alison to sort out some dates. Besides the list that you've got there that's printed, we've got other things that have come up is the diversity and democracy, the council constitution. I believe there was something else you mentioned, Tracy.
I referred to the work on the hybrid policy as well.
Oh, yes.
So that is something I would like to bring to the Dem Services Committee. It will probably go to a few committees actually, and then probably be reported to full council. But I think it's right that Dem Services Committee do have sight of that and comment on it.
Do you have a time frame in mind?
Well, if we send these questionnaires out, I'll start working on it in August. We'll send the questionnaires out hopefully in August to come back end of August, early part of September. They will also inform the hybrid policy. So I think maybe possibly October or November meeting, Chair.
Okay. I thought you said shortly ago that you wanted the survey to come back to this committee.
Yeah.
We weren't having a meeting till September.
So if we can get it back in September, we will. Otherwise, if you go to October or November meetings, then we'll try and bring it in as soon as we can. It's quite tricky, isn't it? But I think I'd like the results of the questionnaire survey brought back to the committee, possibly at the same time as the hybrid policy. So you can have a look to see what the questionnaire survey has come back with, and then we can look at the hybrid policy at the same time. So maybe you can bring both of those reports at the same committee meeting.
Right. Has anybody, oh, sorry, should we take these questions first? Leslie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of things, just following on from what you've just been saying about survey. I mean, I'm tempted to think we've got to get this done sooner rather than later. Is there any way we could confirm the survey itself just by email, and then that won't hinder it getting out? Would that be possible? I mean, as I say, the kind of comments I've got, that they're not major, they're just little bits and pieces with a couple of additional words, nothing really huge at all.
Sorry, I may have misled you, Chair, if I can just intervene. I'm not talking about bringing the questionnaire back for final approval by the Democratic Services Committee. I think we can do that outside the rooms, make the minor tweaks. I'll wait for Rhiannon Miller to come back from annual leave and then we'll send it out. What I was talking about was bringing the results of the councillor questionnaire back to the committee. So I was hoping Rhianna's offered to coordinate all of the responses so that we can go through them at the committee, and possibly at the same time, it just depends on my workload really, have a hybrid policy for you also to look at.
Right, okay, that's
Sorry,
great.
I think I've misled you there.
I didn't understand you quite at the beginning.
Can I also just add that I think that the fact that I've raised it already today, this idea of diversity and democracy, I think we need to look at that sooner rather than later. So if there's a chance that the work that's been done that you mentioned earlier, if that's sort of near fruition, or we could look at where they are on it, I think that would be really useful. Because let's face it, we ought to be seeing more people next year standing for council and getting in as councillors from a far more diverse setup than we've got at the moment. Thanks.
June?
Yes, whether Tracy can clarify on the future work programme, the review of the councillor handbook and the promotion of costs of care. Would that be in the councillor's handbook? And are there other things councillors can claim other than care?
I'd need to check that, councillor, actually. Unfortunately, I didn't check it prior to coming to this meeting, and I'm not sure what this piece of work and why it's on the work plan actually entails. Sorry, I'm picking this up, but I'm not quite sure why they're on the agenda, but it's probably an annual report that comes to the Dem Services Committee, but I'll need to do a piece of work on that, councillor. There's also some updates that will need to be made following the Local Government Elections Wales Act as well. So that was something I'm quite keen to look at the handbook for, to see how we need to update it in light of that legislation. But I'll double check it for you. As I say, I haven't looked at the work plan in any great detail, apart from a couple of things that I put on there, and I'll need to revisit the other items on it.
They do come through every annually, Tracy, those two things. We talk about them annually.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any particular requests for something to be done earlier rather than later? No? Okay. Discuss the work plan with Alison and Tracy outside of this meeting. Anybody got anything else to raise? No? on this? Okay, well, I'll call the meeting to an end then. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, remote.